to Chaplain Major Rudy Olivo. He is our first Air Force chaplain, and he and I work closely together with regard to, as any of you who were listening earlier to our conversation about early COVID, we had a couple missions that we were working, and we work them up on our side, then we send them to his side of the house, and his team works on it from the Air Force side, and ultimately we get the yay or the nay on the activity that we're going to be, the mission that we're going to be doing. And so he and I have worked closely together, and he will tell you more about that. And Chaplain Olivo, it's great to have you here. It's good to be on the team together. God bless as you share your presentation.
Well, first off, I just want to extend thanks to the Civil Air Patrol Chaplain Corps, to you, Chaplain Murdoch, and to you, Chaplain Miner. You guys have been nothing but first class all the way. And it's been an honor for me to work with Civil Air Patrol for going on 8 years now, from my time at the Air Operations Center to my time here at First Air Force. And I'll get into what those different organizations are here in just a moment as I get into the brief. A couple caveats here. First, I am using my kid's Chromebook because the military won't let me use Zoom anymore on a military laptop. So I don't have PowerPoint on it. I apologize for how it may be coming out to you. Second, if you have questions along the way, I look forward to hearing them when we get to the end. I think that I'm about 90 to 95% on the Civil Air Patrol and the correct terminology. But if I stumble or stub my toe along the way, please correct me to 100% because it's important to me to honor you with the appropriate language. So as we get things started, I just want to give you this first image. This is an image of the building where I work, right? So when we pull up to work every day, there are 4 weapon systems that are in front of us. The 4th you can't see. It's all the way down on the other end of the image. It is an Army Avenger, which is basically a Humvee with an air defense missile battery on the back of it. There's an F-15 further away there, an Eagle. Closer to us is an F-16, a Viper, right? And then as we get closer, we get the Civil Air Patrol Cessna there. And every one of those mission weapon systems are essential to us accomplishing our mission every day. And this title slide not only has those multiple weapon systems there, but they have a couple other things I want to draw your attention to. They have 2 flags. So as a part of the NORAD enterprise, we are a part of the only binational command in the world. I don't know if you know this or not, but it is not uncommon for a Canadian to be the first HAC general officer in American air defense every night. And it is not uncommon for an American officer to be the first HAC general officer in the air defense chain of command every night. We take care of each other's homeland. We have since NORAD was stood up in the 50s at the height of the Cold War. And while there was some question about whether or not NORAD was a necessary entity, perhaps a decade or 2 ago, we have seen now more than ever that our brothers and sisters to the north are very dear friends and trusted compatriots. So we do this mission together, and our tagline there on the bottom of the slide is Homeland First. And we use that appropriately where our Canadian brothers and sisters can speak of their homeland, and we can as well. So you see the weapon systems, you see the flags, and then at the top of the slide, you see 3 titles: Continental United States, U.S., NORAD region, First Air Force, and Air Forces Northern. Those are 3 titles, 3 different things, but they all serve a common mission. I'll get to that in just a little bit. Before I go on to my next slide and keep going, I will say this. When I talked to Chaplain Miner, he asked me first and foremost about chaplains that serve this mission set. And I thought it'd be appropriate for me just to talk to you about the mission writ large. And, you know, if you like me and you don't think I drone on and on too long and you want to bring me back, I can talk more about individual 1s and 2s of chaplain action. But I think it's really important for you to know what we do because we represent the Air Force as it relates to deployed action in the continental United States. And that's going to marry up with Civil Air Patrol so much that even if you don't come on as a mission chaplain with an Air Force support rating, you're still going to be serving Civil Air Patrol members who are likely working with us. And so I think that will help you in your ministry. So as I scroll on down here to the second slide, every good Air Force brief is going to have an organizational structure chart in there somewhere. It appears to be a little bit of an eye chart, but as you take a look at the slide, This really paints a picture of who we are. And I hope that you can make everything out on your screen there. But there's a few things that I want to draw your attention to. One, some of the colors are informative, okay? Where you see the purple colors are specifically going to deal with joint commands. That is where Air Force is serving with the other services to make sure that we accomplish mission. So if you look to the top left, there are 4 stars there. My boss is Lieutenant General Mark Sasseville. He's the 3-star in the middle, and he has 2 4-star general bosses. And up on that top left where you see the purple, his boss is the commander of NORAD and US Northcom. And what NORAD does is primarily they are air defense. I talked about that a moment ago. We stood it up in the 50s when we were afraid that the Russians were going to come over the Arctic Circle, and we needed to make sure that America stayed safe from the Russians, right? So when it comes to air defense stuff, he works for a guy named General O'Shaughnessy in Colorado Springs. General O'Shaughnessy also has a job where he's the commander of Northcom. Now, mostly people are going to be connected to Northcom and the missions that they do when we respond to natural disasters, from COVID to wildfires to hurricanes to super winter storms and everything else in between. That is a Northcom response. So when the federal government calls on the military and says, hey, military, we have something really crazy happening here and we want you to come and help us, they call on Northcom. Northcom, that purple entity, then reaches out to each of the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, and says, we want to structure a deployment or multiple deployments so that we can help the American populace in this way. So that purple entity, which is all of the services, has a 3-star commander at least who works for that 4-star. And in this case, my boss is the Air Force commander that works for NORAD and Northcom. Up on the top right is the other 4-star boss that my boss has, and that is the commander of Air Combat Command. That 4-star boss makes sure that all of us are organized, trained, equipped, and sustained to accomplish our mission. And he is also the guy that hands the forces over to the guy in Colorado Springs to go accomplish mission. So what you have going on here then, in real simple terms, on the top left is deployed in America, and up on the top right is make sure the people are ready to be deployed in America. And so my boss in the middle, that 3-star, is serving 2 masters all the time. Now, I know I've got a room full of chaplains who are listening to me, and I shudder to think somebody's going to raise their hand and say, hey, didn't I read somewhere that no one can serve 2 masters? We can have a theological conversation about that later. Nonetheless, my boss does indeed have 2 masters. In order for him to do his job, he needs a whole bunch of people to make it happen. He's the 3-star boss. He has a deputy commander to Maple Leaf, which is a 2-star equivalent, who is there every day, and that is his deputy commander, and his real focus is on the air defense mission. He also has my boss also has a 1-star vice commander who takes care of all of the U.S. Air Force centric things, though all of the team is working together to make sure everything works part and parcel together. In addition to the full-timers that I mentioned there, the deputy commander of CONAR and the vice commander of 1st Air Force, we also have part-time general officers who show up really regularly to be a part of what we do. We have an Air National Guard advisor who is a part-time general officer, but he shows up pretty regularly to make sure things go. And we have a mobilization assistant who is a reservist, who is a 1-star. So I hope as I'm talking through all of this, you're grabbing on really quickly that we are perhaps the most total force command in all of the United States Air Force. And that's without me getting down to the bottom right where you'll see Civil Air Patrol USAF, right? Where I'm not even to CAP USAF yet. So we are a command that takes care of America, and we do it every day with the total force. I'll even give you a little secret that is really not a secret at all, but people don't even consider. So my boss is an Air National Guard 3-star general. A lot of people are not aware that the commander of all things Homeland Operation is a guardsman, but indeed he is. And in fact, it is always an Air National Guard billet. So he is a 3-star Guard commander. He has a 2 Canadian Maple Leaf deputy, and his 1-star vice commander is an active duty officer. And we do business every day, and it is seamless. In addition to these senior officers, the way they make things go is they have what is known as an AFFOR staff. So these are specialists who makes sure that he is aware of what he needs to do to accomplish mission. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there is a directorate numbering system that is used by the services. So for example, the A1 is personnel, A2 is intel, A3 is operations, so on and so forth. So you'll see a dark blue box down to the bottom right that says the A4 staff. What is a little bit unique to us is while we're accomplishing all of this mission, we have another directorate called the National Security Emergency Preparedness Directorate, NSEP. And what NSEP does is they send out liaison officers to every one of the 50 states and also to other federal agencies to let those folks know what services the 1st Air Force can bring to bear in a time of need. And one of those things they're talking about all the time is Civil Air Patrol. If we've got a hurricane coming, or we're going to send some red, white, and blue planes out to take a look before the hurricane hits, are we going to be there after? Are you guys going to be doing the amazing relief work that you do? How are the different ways that you're going to engage with these communities? Do these governors or local EOCs even know? So our NSEP liaison officers, what we call EPLOs, are out there all the time. Additionally, we have a really cool little mission set you'll see kind of mid-slide to the right called the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center. And the AFRCC is a very small squadron level command, active duty airmen who work with us here at Tyndall Air Force Base. And what they do is anytime a beacon goes off, anytime somebody responds and calls for a lost person, if they're hiking or flying or boating, the Air Force Coordination Center is the coordinating element that works with local sheriff's offices, tribal authorities, and sometimes Civil Air Patrol to find lost and stranded folks. Civil Air Patrol also does some really cool cell phone forensics that literally save lives all the time. And our AFRCC folks are working with them as well. What you'll also note there is Cap USAF is connected to General Sasseville. That is one of his wings, wing equivalent command for an 06 commander. And this is the place where Civil Air Patrol connects to the Air Force. So that Cessna is out in front of our headquarters building because the 1st Air Force is family to Civil Air Patrol, and Civil Air Patrol is family to 1st Air Force. And you guys know the Civil Air Patrol mission set better than I do. A lot of times when I'm giving this brief to senior chaplains about what we do, they know little about the Civil Air Patrol, and I won't go deeper there, but you guys definitely know it better than I do. Just touching on a couple other pieces on this slide before I move on from it. So you will notice moving straight over to the left, yet another purple box. That purple box is an Army air defense element. So there are times, places, and spaces where we know Kidden in the continental United States have air defense from the ground using one of those Avengers I talked about a little bit ago. There is a possibility that we could be using one of those Stinger missiles to get the bad guys. And so those guys have OPCON, or my boss has OPCON over those guys, is making sure that we're all working together to defend the air from bad things happening. When you look at this slide, there are a couple of the things I want to point out. The 601st Air Operations Center is up on your top left. And what the Air Operations Center does is for any work that is operational in nature, where we're flying aircraft of any kind, the 601st AOC is producing an air tasking order that's saying where planes are going, what they should be doing. And then we have an ops floor that makes sure all of that happens. And we have a Civil Air Patrol rep there on the ops floor who's integrating with the CCO, the Chief of Combat Operations, to make sure everything is happening just as it should. Most of the time in America, thanks be to God, the AOC ops floor is a sleepy place, right? When things are going as it should, American air traffic handles itself. The FAA has it, the airliners are doing their thing, people are flying for fun when they're able, and we don't have to get involved. But when we do, we have a well-oiled machine of combat operators, of civilian authority like the FAA. We have, of course, I have our legal folks there, and we also have the Civil Air Patrol, who is part of what's going on as well. So if you look just down below the Air Operations Center, you will see the Western Air Defense Sector and the Eastern Air Defense Sector. So if you take a look at the US map and you look at the Mississippi River, everything east of the Mississippi is going to be controlled by the Eastern Air Defense Sector, and everything west of the Mississippi is going to be controlled by WADS. And they're just making sure that they're controlling military aircraft and they're doing what they need to do in case something bad should happen. So they are doing a great job controlling that airspace. Below that, you'll see our other NORAD regions. So remember I said to you that NORAD is this Cold War era binational command. So NORAD is broken down into 3 chunks of land. We have the continental United States Aerospace Defense region, which is us. So think the lower 48. We have the Canadian Air region, which is Canada. And then we have the Alaska NORAD region, which is known as ANR. So you see that red box that says CANR, and you see the blue one that says ANR, and then we are CONAR. Those 3 regions are the 3 subordinate organizations to NORAD to make sure that air defense happens every day. So in every one of those ways, my boss is making sure that 3 distinct mission sets are happening. And I'm going to get into those here in just a minute. Before I move on to the next slide and separate the 3 mission sets down, and you look at this very busy slide and you see everything that's going on all around you, this is what I want your takeaway to be. Every day we defend America and we're ready to take care of Americans with the total force. And we have had Civil Air Patrol as a part of the total force long before it was cool, right? Like right now, the Air Force is finally catching up and saying, hey, this is a cool thing. Like the folks in DC are getting it. But long before they got there, we understood how important it was to have Civil Air Patrol as a part of what we were doing. And we're grateful to be partners in this. So all of these things are happening, and my boss has 3 distinct command authorities under which he operates, right? So the first one to the far left I spoke about to you a little bit ago, that's basically air defense. He's making sure that bad stuff doesn't happen. So let me give you a very practical way that Civil Air Patrol helps us with his CONAR hat, with his commander defending the homeland, right? So we never know when bad guys are going to attack. We never know how they're going to attack, but we know that they're going to attack in ways that we don't expect. So what we can do is we can have exercises where we have Civil Air Patrol pilots flying planes pretending to be bad guys. And the good guys can go out there and hone their skills with this vital support element that the Civil Air Patrol plays. So if you look at the left and you see all the things that we do, the aerospace control alert, air defense, all of that, the way that we make sure that awful, awful, awful stuff like 9/11 never happens again is the Civil Air Patrol helps us better as we refine our skills, okay? If you move to the center column there and you look at 1st Air Force, when you look all the way at the bottom, you will see the Air Force Auxiliary Employment. Namely, when there is that moment where we need to take a Civil Air Patrol member and put that airman on mission status, at that point, that Civil Air Patrol member on mission status then ultimately works for my boss. So my boss will be the one who will be employing these Air Force forces and sending folks out. So this is part of his responsibility as a commander of what's called a numbered Air Force. And this is also the way by which we connect CAP USAF to 1st Air Force and the Air Force writ large. And then finally, Air Forces Northern. So when he wears this hat, this is the defense support of civil authority kind of stuff. This is when we're doing search and rescue for a mountain climber out in Colorado who gets lost, and we're working with Civil Air Patrol to do the cell phone forensics and perhaps to fly and go look and save that person's life, right? So in every one of these chains of command authorities, the 3 different ways that my boss has authority to accomplish his mission, to defend the airspace, to take care of Americans when there is a time of need, and to ensure the care and feeding of his forces, in every one of those, the Civil Air Patrol is intimately involved. And what I may just ask, especially I saw, in some of the chat there, you have a number of newer Civil Air Patrol chaplains. I saw a couple of them giving props to being a part of the Alpha class and doing it online. Kudos to you guys. Just ask the other Civil Air Patrol members if there are ways that they have or do on a regular basis work with 1st Air Force. And if they look at you in a puzzled kind of way, that's okay, move on. But if they know what that means, then ask them to describe it to you so you can help understand what it's all about. And in so understanding that, you can serve your folks better, taking care of them, doing that tactical ministry that's so important. So we look at the strategic plan, right? I won't read every one of this to you. I won't read every one of these pieces to you. I know you're I know you're smart folks and you can read this on your own. But the things that I do want to lift up is we are in the business of defending the homeland. And there was a time in the past where it really did not seem like defending the homeland was necessary. You know, at one level, we didn't think we needed to defend the homeland from a pandemic, but it's here. And at another level, we thought that Russia was the sleeping bear that wasn't going to wake up anymore. But Mr. Putin has shown us that he regularly wants to get our attention. And so we don't know if that attention is just for show, if it means something else. So every day we are going to defend the homeland and we're going to dominate the airspace. And Civil Air Patrol is most certainly about that. As a part of the mission accomplishment, the vision below really speaks to how we're going to get after this. And when you look at these underlined items like embracing evolutionary thinking, where we look at an evolution of air power, I also think of the work the Civil Air Patrol does with the unmanned aerial systems, right, the UASs. These are places where the Civil Air Patrol is leaning forward and the Air Force understands the asset that all of your members are and the cool work your folks are doing. You know, for me as a guy who's not doing tactical ministry all the time, I hope that you're as excited for the work that your cadets, your seniors are doing, and you just delight in what they're doing and open that door to do amazing ministry because you genuinely really think they're doing and accomplishing cool stuff. And if you do that, the ministry will just happen on its own. And in fact, I did jot down here when Chaplain Murdoch was talking, he referenced a conversation that he had with Chaplain Steve Scheich, who's the Air Force Chief of Chaplains, where he referenced, our people are trained by your people. And I'll just give you guys all a whisper is I don't think that needs to be a one-way training. For the chaplains that I influence in my functional role at 1st Air Force, AF North, you know, my goal going forward is to figure out a way where the Civil Air Patrol can help train Air Force chaplains so that we do domestic operations and DISCA better. Because I think there are some things that you guys are on top of. And Chaplain Murdoch and I have had cursory conversations about that, but that's something we'll be getting after as well. That's one of those evolutionary thinking items that are forefront for me as it relates to Civil Air Patrol. So I showed you that there were 3 different chains of command, and this just gives you a quick snapshot of the different assets that the boss has to make sure that Americans are taken care of, right? So on the CONAR side, he's got F-15Cs, he's got F-16s, he's got those Avengers I talked to you about. He's even got some U.S. Coast Guard helicopters, airborne refuelers of the KC-135s, and then of course we have C2 structure, both the stuff on the ground, like the 186th Air Operations Group that is an Air National Guard entity out of Meridian, Mississippi, and the JDOC, which is an Army ground-based entity, and then the E3, which is an AWACS, a Sentry. On the far right, there is AF North. Remember, AF North is the defense support of civil authority stuff, the natural disaster stuff. And you'll see just rolling through there all kinds of stuff. For our conversation piece, what I really want to look at is in real little letters. If you get under Cat 3 in the far right column, you'll see 2 by religious support teams. So in the Air Force, the normal way that we employ and deploy is a chaplain, officer, and an enlisted member, which is a religious support team. And what that means is if there is an event going on in the U.S. that is defense support of civil authority approved, we have a 48-hour turn time to employ a chaplain religious support team. So that is something that we are always aware of. If that's a hurricane, if that is work on the southwest border, what have you. So these are the different images of the things we accomplish. I think I've spoke to the other things such as AFOR staff, INSEP, AOC, and the like. Again, the steady state and on-demand forces core to everything what we do. You'll see in that column in the center is the Civil Air Patrol and the Air Force Auxiliary, the 2 hats that you all wear. So if you look at all of the stuff we do, we've also got to talk about where do we do it, right? Where do we do it? When my boss is wearing the NORAD hat, the Defending North America hat, you'll take a look at the map on the left, and you can see where he is looking at the skies to make sure that we are not going to be surprised by what our adversaries may be doing. If you take a look at on the right, you'll see the NORTHCOM map. And for the most part, these two things are the same. You will note that there are some differences, right? The NORAD map is just Canada and the United States. The NORTHCOM map includes Mexico. So when we're doing work with Mexico, that's my boss wearing his NORTHCOM hat. You'll also note if you look out into the Gulf and out in the Gulf of Mexico and into the Atlantic Ocean, there's more space wearing the NORTHCOM hat. So as a for example, we worked Hurricane Dorian and we were the lead component. So of all of the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, we were the lead component responding to Hurricane Dorian relief when that tragedy struck the Bahamas last year. So not only do we take care of ourselves, but if we have a foreign partner who reaches out to us for help, such as the Bahamas, we are standing ready. And so on pretty short order, we flew in just south of about 250 short tons, 250K short tons of aid to the Bahamas when there was need. So that gives you an idea of our service component mission. The other thing we like to do when we talk to folks about what our mission set is, you know, a lot of times, and I'm sorry going up on you, but a lot of times when we look at a map, we look at it this way, right? But we are in an era of American history when we need to take the globe and look at America at it and rotate it down about 90 degrees. And when you do it that way, you'll get a real understanding of how close Alaska is to Russia, for our Canadian brothers and sisters, how close they are as well, and how this area of interest is what we focus on, right? This is the air defense piece that is very much in our awareness every day. And this is where we need the Civil Air Patrol to hone our abilities to make sure that we are prepared at a moment's notice, no matter what may come. So with that as my brief, I just want to take a moment to wrap up. We deter the bad guys, we detect the bad guys, and we seek to defeat the threats, even when those threats are COVID related, to make sure that we can take care of the homeland. And we're all about taking care of homeland first. With that, I yield my time back to the moderator and make myself available for any questions.
Sir, this is Jeff Williams, Deputy Chief for Information Technology, among other things. One of the touch points that we have had in the past is the conference in Colorado Springs, sponsored by NORTHCOM for chaplains. The invitations are pretty spotty. Sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. Is it possible, at least for the national staff, to get the invitation, or maybe even down to our region chaplains? Those conferences are phenomenal, and it's well worth our time. But if we don't know they're happening, it's really hard to go there.
Sure. The first simple answer is the invitation is not mine to extend, right? It is the invitation of the command chaplain at NORAD and NORTHCOM. That said, last year when I had conversations with Chaplain Satgast, I did put him in contact with the then command chaplain at NORTHCOM when Chaplain Satgast was your chief of chaplains, and he invited him. This year's conference was canceled because of COVID, but
Right.
Knowing the leadership that's in place at Colorado Springs, I think Chaplain Murdoch and I could speak with Chaplain Carr and let's entertain that conversation with the understanding that, of course, you know, it's his decision on his invitation list. But the stock of Civil Air Patrol is going up, and I would be more than willing to engage that conversation with Chaplain Murdoch.
Thank you.
This is Chaplain Murdoch, and I was invited by Chaplain Carr to that conference, and we will have that conversation. I have known Chaplain Carr his entire career because I was his endorsing agent at one point. So I'll be happy to talk with Chaplain Carr, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in the near future. And Chaplain Olivo, I'm looking forward to maybe having that conversation in DC with you and he in the near future.
Thank you, sir.
Chaplain Olivo, could you address how the creation of the U.S. Space Force is changing the mission, if any, for your command and for NORAD?
I sure can't speak on behalf of NORAD. The way that we are integrating with Space Forces is my boss has a couple space operators on his staff. We have a lieutenant colonel who is the director of Space Forces. And as I understand it now, what will happen is this DIR Space 4, Director of Space Forces, this DIR Space 4 is currently an Air Force member, but will soon start to wear a U.S. Space Force name tape. But the integration for what he does and what he will do will be much similar, at least in the near term. I don't know more than that, the particulars of how they're going to roll it out, but in my cursory conversations with my colleague, he said it's going to look similar going forward. It's all about providing assets to the boss to respond to need. The one thing I will speak to that I am aware of is that they're looking at using a model with the Air Force Chaplain Corps serving the U.S. Space Force in a way that is similar to the way the U.S. Navy serves the Coast Guard and the U.S. Marine Corps, which is to say the U.S. Space Force will not grow up its own chaplains. Instead, the U.S. Air Force Chaplain Corps will have Chaplain Corps members who will sometimes go serve Space Force billets and wear Space Force uniforms, and then will cycle back to the U.S. Air Force. I, for one, hope to get a hack being in the Space Force, and I think I will dress like Han Solo.
We have a question on Moodle. Where do you see CAP chaplains used by you, or where can we best help the Air Force?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the things Chaplain Murdoch and I kind of talked through at the early COVID days were how can we employ Chaplain Corps forces in places where there are need? And some of this is driven by law, right? There are times and places where we can put people on a Title X order, which is functionally what happens when you're on mission. And there are times and places when we can't. So what we need to do, I think, is twofold. One, Chaplain Murdoch has taken the great step of making sure that he is connecting with Chaplain Shike. So again, going back to that line he used a little bit ago, our people are trained by your people. So there's no barrier in the training piece. The other part, though, is, which I referenced, is we need to get our U.S. Air Force chaplains, captain and major level, to get invested in your training at some level. This part is Rudy Olivos, right? This is not on behalf of the U.S. Air Force Chaplain Corps. This is just what I think, right? So what I think is we need to get captain and major types invested in some of the CAP training that you guys do and understand its value, so that as they begin to work their way up through the ranks, it becomes organic, that they know that the resource is there. So some of it, just going back to it, is out of our control. The law will tell us when we can use Civil Air Patrol chaplains and when we can't. Beyond that, it's about training that goes both ways. And in so doing that, when Civil Air Patrol chaplains are receiving training from the Air Force Chaplain Corps College, the senior leaders of the current Air Force Chaplain Corps will have trust in the training you get. And then the junior Air Force members are getting Civil Air Patrol training and seeing the value that you bring. All of those things, I think, are going to, work and create a synergy where it will happen more and more. I will say in my time around the Air Operations Center in 1st Air Force, I think I have to go back to Superstorm Sandy was the last time we employed a Civil Air Patrol chaplain in our AOR. Now, that's not talking about work that chaplains have done at base chapels and the like, but for my business, I think Superstorm Sandy was the last time that we had one.
Thank you. A question from chat. Question, is AF North have a similar relationship with Civil Air Search and Rescue Association in Canada as what you have with us?
I can't speak to that, right? So while we share the Homeland Defense mission set, we being the Royal Canadian Air Force, the United States Air Force, operate with independence as it relates to civil search and rescue in our respective nations. So it would not surprise me if that was the case. But as a for example, I referenced the Air Force Rescue Coordination Center. That guy for my boss as wearing his first Air Force hat. And so those lines, to my knowledge, don't cross to the Canadian side. Probably, but I just don't know.
Thank you.
Sir, there is a question, more like many comments in the chat room about when a AFAM mission is going to open up in Space Force. I think there is a 10,000 cool point bonus to the first CAP chaplain that supports the Space Force.
Yeah, everybody's wanting to get in that business. So I'm on 3 years worth of active duty orders, but I am a guard chaplain. So I live and breathe DISCA. I have for lots of years, Dom Ops. But we, the National Guard writ large, are trying to get into Space Force business as well. So it would not surprise me if that happens eventually. One of the things that Chaplain Murdoch and I talked about were potentials for AFAM missions, particularly serving the three-letter agencies. We look out there and we know the three-letter agencies, and even those with more letters, right? Like FEMA, they don't have their own chaplain corps that I'm aware of, or at least if they do, that it's a smaller subset and they can't run out and grab masses. And it'd be really cool to see if we could connect those kinds of things. But those are just interesting thoughts for me, and I don't have a direct connection point to those. I do have an opportunity to have some amount of influence to create these relationships and hopefully set a way forward that our relationship will get tighter and tighter in the days ahead.
See the beginning of the Jedi.
Sir, several of us supported FEMA headquarters during the Hurricane Maria and the massive hurricanes in 2017. They actually asked CAP chaplains to be the headquarters chaplains for a 7-day period for 24/7 coverage. So we've already have a relationship, at least within Washington, D.C., dealing with FEMA.
Well, you just increased my hope of what is to come. So that makes me happy. That wasn't in our lane, but I'm glad you did that. Corporate status, AFAM, however you did it, I'm thrilled for that.
Thank you. There's probably great interest going on about your status as a guard chaplain holding what I'll call a command billet or a command chaplain billet. So there is an interweaving of the total force in the chaplain corps?
Sure there is, and particularly at our headquarters. As I mentioned, the boss is a guardsman, his 1-star is an active duty guy, the chief of staff is a guardsman. Our headquarters, while we're total force, is guard heavy because of the active duty, the guard, and the reserve. We are the most comfortable with doing domestic operations, right? So picking from those 3 groups of folks who have had background in that mission set, there are just more of us. I do think that the military writ large is doing a better job of beginning to incorporate the total force into what they do. Another case in point is the 5 Romeo, the Religious Affairs Airman Career Field Functional Manager. The incoming Chief Master Sergeant is a reservist. It was the first time it's ever happened, but the Chief of Chaplains, when he went to pick his next chief, he didn't pick an active duty Chief Master Sergeant. He picked an he picked an Air Force Reserve Command Chief. So we're starting to wade into these waters, and I think we'll see more and more of it. Now, I don't think it will ever be, kind of equally separated. When somebody has a life experience doing the job full time for 20 or 30 years, the reserve component, be it reserve or guard, can't always compete. But there are unique places and spaces where we bring something to the fight, where I think we can be value added in the same way Civil Air Patrol can for the United States Air Force.
So as a guard chaplain, you would go back, you might go back to a guard billet, or will you stay within the world of active duty throughout your career?
No, yeah, I'll return. I am a Florida Guardsman, and when my orders are done here, I will return. I will return to the Florida Guard. You asked the question a little bit ago about the signature block. Right now my signature block reads chaplain, major, USAF. But when I'm done with my Title 10 orders, when I'm no longer on an active duty order, my signature block will read chaplain, major, FLANG, Florida Air National Guard. So love the Guard. Thought I was going to be an active duty guy, but God had different plans for me, and it's been better than I could have expected. I'm just honored and humbled that God's called me to do this.
Wow. I hope as the course director, you have inspired us, and you did exactly what I hoped you would do, which is to allow our entire chaplain corps to just see how integrated they are. And you did that so well with these slides to show us that we are part of something bigger than just Civil Air Patrol. And all these little hints to be more professional, be like the total force. There's a reason for it, and it appears in your slides that we deal with you and with the total force in a very professional way. And it's important for us as Civil Air Patrol to really step up to be that fourth component of the Total Forces Chaplain Program. And we really appreciate so very much you showing us just how much we are part of something very, very much bigger. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
We have no more questions from Moodle, so we'll go ahead and cut that off. And I think we're done with questions from chat as well.
Very true. Chaplain Murdoch, I think the gavel is yours, sir, if you would like to take it.
Thank you very much, Chaplain O. It's always good to hear your voice and good to see you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for taking time. I look forward to our future conversations and our future time together. Will you be going to DC in August?
I will not. So
Okay.
if you're down here, let me know. I would love to have a conversation with you before you engage Chaplain Carr, just as a heads up. But I think
Sure.
it's going to be more good conversations to come.
Good. I'll be in touch with you this week, Lord willing.
Awesome.
Okay.
Hey, before I go, one more time, thanks to everybody. Look forward to working with you in the days ahead, and stay healthy. Take care of people and each other. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Well, everyone, our hour is rapidly coming to a close. Thank you so much for being a part. I said that if there was time, I would be willing to take any other questions. I don't know, Chaplain Miner, what do we have for time? And Chaplain Williams, are there other questions for me, or do we want to address them offline?
We have 11 minutes to go, sir.
All right.
There are a large number of questions here, so we'll probably have one or two, but you're going to get inundated with questions in the next couple of minutes, sir. I apologize.
All right,
First
not a
question.
problem. Well, let's do this. Why don't we surprise everybody and have a Baptist let you out early?
Why don't we have a Baptist let us out early, sir?
Not a problem. Hey, folks, thank you so much. Let me close in prayer, and God bless you. And we got one more question, so let's take that question before I close in prayer. Chaplain Miner, go ahead.
One last question. And there are 153. We've had up to 156 this evening, and we have had some problems on the telecommunications line, and we'll get that fixed for next week, or for Thursday as well. So